for coaches, healers, people in the spiritual community, we're often told to look beyond the limitations of the client, and we're told, look at their potential and hold their highest potential in front of yourself. And when you are coaching them, keep bringing them to embody that highest potential that they have. And unfortunately, our desire, our wish to look beyond those limitations, beyond the unhelpful behaviors, toxic behaviors, we're always trying to kind of understand and try to look at that potential of the person. And that really makes us, on most times, really vulnerable to being manipulated on the receiving end of toxic behaviors for quite a long period of time. We're taught to understand, to have understanding for people, and to help them see that their potential, to help them embody that potential. And what happens oftentimes, that spills into the relationships, in marriages, in friendships, in our relationships with our in-laws, with our parents. We try to understand because we've spent a lot of time trying to understand ourselves. We also spend a lot of time trying to understand them and what drives their behavior. We've gone on to doing so much education, learning, certifications, professional education, to be able to understand how the human mind works and what it takes to change the behavior. So when we find ourselves in relationships where there's a lot of toxic behavior, when there's manipulation, there is abuse, our kind of natural response is to have empathy and to look beyond their limitations, the limitations of those people, to understand what they're going through, to put ourselves into their shoes and to look at their potential. And often, what will happen is that we're going to tolerate a lot more of that mistreatment than someone else might. Someone else might get fed up, but because a lot of the time that coaching or spiritual perspective, personal development perspective is so deeply ingrained within us. And we are so deeply involved into these relationships, especially or in partnerships, marriages that have lasted for decades over and more than decades. It's difficult for us to be objective and to separate ourselves or distance ourselves and get out of those emotions and look at what is going on. So we combine those two areas and we find ourselves tolerating a lot of um, shitty behavior, a lot of behavior that we would not tolerate otherwise. We find ourselves tolerating toxic behavior, no changes in behavior. And we spend a lot of time trying to understand their perspective. And what oftentimes happens is, especially in marriages, especially in relationships um, that are that have lasted for a long, long time, oftentimes we'll go to therapy. We will do more education. We will take another course. I've noticed this with clients as well, and my peers, my friends. What happens is they go into getting more education, more understanding. Let me learn how to communicate better. Let me try to improve myself. Let me work on my energy. Let me take on responsibility. And a lot of the time, when we are doing this, a lot of the time, we're taking a lot of the responsibility for their behaviors onto ourselves. And we tolerate that for a long, long time and find ourselves in a very unhappy and unsatisfying situations where we would benefit from distancing ourselves. And I've also seen this in spiritual circles where there's a talk about divine feminine, divine masculine, especially in the heterosexual relationships, as what happens is women will try to go more into divine feminine, take on more and see, okay, let me go into my divine feminine, let me change myself in expectation that the other side will change their behavior in response. And often that doesn't happen. It does not happen because we cannot, in those kind of situations, what is happening is that you have these two polarities, and no matter how much we change and no matter how much you try to mold yourself and work on yourself, that's, taking responsibility, you taking responsibility 100% for your part in it, unless the other side takes 100% responsibility for their part in it, things will not change. And, it took me a long time to be able to accept that and uh, get to grips with that. And also, what often happens is that we try so hard to understand why they behave in a certain way. So you might find yourself that you are asking yourself, there's no way I could do the things that they're doing. If someone is displaying narcissistic behaviors, manipulation, toxic, really toxic behaviors, you will try to really hard understand why can't they care as much as you care. I've had several conversations on this topic. It was, there's no way, I cannot understand. How can they do this? How can they keep doing this behavior? How can they care so little? And the thing is, you will never be able to understand that, no matter how much you try, because you are an empath, because you have done so much inner work. You will never be able to understand. It will never make sense to you why someone cannot care as much as do. It will never be clear to you. You will never be able to comprehend or understand why is it so difficult. Why is it so difficult for them to change their behavior? Why do they care so little? And you might find yourself thinking, oh, maybe if I explain myself better, maybe if I try to prove my worth to them, maybe if I try to prove that I am doing all of these things, that I am putting in the effort, that I am valuable, that I am worthy of love, that I am doing so much of the housework, let's say, that you are putting in so much effort in the relationship. No matter how much you try to explain it to them, no matter how much you try to prove it or get them to acknowledge, this is the thing, in most cases they will not be able to acknowledge that. They are not capable of doing so, and I'm going to tell you why. But even if even if you can understand why they're doing such behaviors, even if you can understand their perspective of why are they being toxic or manipulative or abusive, it does not change the fact that they are still doing the behavior and they're not doing anything actively to change that behavior. And one of the reasons why this happens is a lot of the time, people, from my experience, what I have observed is that people who display narcissistic behaviors, people who are manipulative, have those toxic behaviors, they are not capable of facing their own truth. They are not capable of admitting their wrongs and admitting that there is something fundamentally not wrong, but wrong with what they're doing. They cannot accept that they are the ones making a mistake. And what happens is, in their model of the world, everything around them is at fault. They can never, they can't accept responsibility for those behaviors. Because if they did, it would collapse their whole model of the world. And the behaviors that they are doing, the denial or resistance or lack of acknowledgement in the way their behavior contributes to the breakdown of your relationship, all of those cannot happen, because if they did, their whole model of the world would fall apart. And basically, those behaviors are their defense systems. They are defending their model of the world, perception of the world. And unless they start actively working on it and addressing that, it will not change. And even if they do, it still does not minimize the impact of their actions on you. And it does not, even if you fully understand and empathize and can put yourself into their shoes, and even if you can forgive them for past behaviors, it does not change the behavior that they continue to do. And that is the harsh truth. And that is something so difficult to accept, or at least it was difficult for me to accept. I found myself in those situations a couple of times. And I think for me, the most difficult part was to grieve and to accept that they're not willing to change. Now, ultimately, the solution will have to be you establishing boundary, and that boundary will look very different for everyone, but it will have to be, in most cases, taking the distance. If you have a husband partner like that, it will have to be distance for you, if if you want to move forward, and if you want to feel better, if you want things to change, if you want to get yourself out of experiencing distress because of their behaviors. Unless they're willing to work on it, and if you're willing to accept for them that they will be working on it, that is, like, you can try something else. But from my experience, distancing yourself, and however that needs to look like for you, establishing boundaries, and, for an example, communicating that you will have no other choice but to create distance if they do not change the behavior, and then act on that boundary if the behavior doesn't change. That's something that you might have to explore. And this is what we do in my one-to-one coaching, whether it is shorter term or longer term, for 6 months. This is what we actually do. We'll look at the reasons why you're finding it hard to let go. What are you searching out of that acknowledgement? Why is it important for you to acknowledge, and what kind of stories you have associated with that? We also look at why you're giving them a million chances and finding reasons for them, because there will be deep and really big clues in that why. Why is it important for you to give them chances, and what are you trying to achieve? What kind of stories are associated with that beliefs? What stories do you attach to it, and kind of like, what meaning do you give to that? Like, what does it mean about you as a person, whether you are making it mean that you are not a good person if you do not give them more chances? Maybe it means that maybe you're attaching meaning that it doesn't, that you're not spiritually evolved enough, or that you're not healed enough, or progressive, or understanding enough. And we'll look at those meanings, which are often very, very deeply subconscious. And then we try to detach and reframe what it actually means. We look at what you're making it mean about your worthiness and value. And you process the emotions that come with making the decisions, whichever decision you decide to do, whether you decide to continue the relationship or take a break, separate, or create a distance, or continue. Like even if you decide to continue, there will be some sort of emotions that you will have to process in there, and often it is often a lot of the emotions that come up are grief and sadness, and help you come to an acceptance of whatever is. So whether you will continue or you will choose to create a distance and help you. In that coaching, I really hold the space for you to be able to come and offload whatever comes for you once you start making those decisions. And I help you get really grounded in your sovereignty, in the deep knowing and trust and peace within yourself, so that when you make those decisions, you are deeply at peace. You make them within knowing that this is the best thing for you. Whatever you decide, that this is the best thing for you, and it is your decision. I only guide you and bring things for you so that you can make the best decision for yourself. That whatever decision you have made, you trust yourself that you've done what's best for yourself, and that you can process any emotions that will come up to the surface. So if you're finding yourself that you are having a couple of relationships like that in your own life, and you can observe the pattern of you constantly trying to have understanding and stretching yourself and overextending yourself to be accepted and acknowledged for the impact that you have in that relationship and everything that you bring to that relationship. And if you're trying to prove your worthiness to them, and if you're finding that you have a couple of relationships like that, I invite you to come and work with me. I would love to help you really dig in deeper. What is at the root? What kind of emotions and beliefs and really core beliefs about yourself and the world? And what kind of truths have you accepted for yourself that are kind of causing you to continue to tolerate and accept that kind of behavior, or really keep going with these relationships? And to help you, of course, figure out what is the best decision for you moving forward, to take all things into consideration, to weigh your options and find a way forward that is conducive to your growth and that feels right for you. And I'd love to help you and to hold the space for you as you go through that journey, because it is a journey. And on the other hand is you being more deeply confident in your own decisions, more grounded and at peace with your decisions, knowing that this is the best thing that for you, and knowing that this is the best thing that you are doing for yourself, that it is taking into account first yourself, your needs, your desires, than everyone else's.